Need a search engine optimization SEO services? Then get in touch with our professional and friendly team to learn more about our range of custom and tailored services designed to suit your exact needs. Every one of our professionals have acquired years of experience, which ensures you get the very best. Our experienced staff is waiting to hear from you and to answer any specific questions that you may have on how we can meet your needs. Just ask for a consultation and let us prove our commitment to you as we promise to maintain the highest level of quality and commitment. Your satisfaction is our prime concern. So please, don't hesitate to get in contact with us and let us show you all the great options we have.
And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at coalition_radio, and of course the mothership, coalitionradionetwork.com, or our legacy site, coalitionradio.us. Folks, if you could take a moment to like, listen, finish, connect, share, whatever it is, we'd be grateful. Social media is, in fact, a critical part of the mission for every independent broadcaster. Well, joining us is someone who's clearly no stranger to the program. In fact, he goes beyond repeat offender status. He's one of our show's original sponsors, has been on a number of times, and is here to talk again tonight about an issue that really encompasses a major part of his life. It's no secret that he has family at the Bristol-Warren School District. He has been intimately involved through a number of efforts to increase the quality of education to every level of student at every level of Bristol-Warren school systems. He's been a constant advocate for that for years, and he's been a potent voice in the community at every level. And of course, I'm talking about Daryl Gould. Daryl, welcome back to the Coalition.
Thank you very much for having me, Pat.
Now, we are going to have calls in tonight. I think we're going to give Daryl a couple of minutes to talk, but we'll be taking calls right away. The call number is 401-205-3738. A few technical problems. The first time we tried this, I think we've got it down. Daryl, talk to us. There seems to be this never. It's got to be frustrating. It's issue after issue after issue for public school parents and their children in Bristol-Warren and actually really across the state. But bring us up to date. What's going on?
So Pat, I'd like to just get a little bit of the background of the Bristol-Warren BWRSD, sorry for the long name, Student and Family Advocacy Group. Because I think there are a lot of misnomers about, who we are, what we do. And I hear that a lot in some of the reactions and some of the comments that we see even on social media. So this group really was born out of really the anti-standardized testing movement. And we did a lot of anti-Common Core, and we're really, curriculum-based. We were looking at that side of things. And, as we evolved, and a lot of this was off social media, this goes back about 6 years. So there's a small group of us that, when the town had the district had their, district-wide chorus concert, we're the ones leaving flyers on the cars and things like that. So basically, that's where we started. And then, through our work, while that was happening, my daughter had a bullying situation that I was less than pleased with how it was handled. And that got me into, I was rather vocal about it. And when people hear, your story and find out what's going on, then you start hearing the similar stories and experiences. And we realized these weren't one-offs. This was really patterns of behavior with our district and how we were handling things. And it was improper, to be kind. So over time, it really evolved into that. And then, people would join our group, and people have different skill sets. So we have people who are educators and people who are social workers and parents and teachers. And so with this new group of skill sets, we really started advocating for students with the bullying, obviously, and then with, when you're doing the bullying stuff, it's very difficult not to bump into IEPs and 504s. And so all of a sudden we realized that the way the district was handling those wasn't necessarily proper. We found a lot of kids that weren't getting the services that, legally they were entitled to, but due to cost reasons, IEPs are expensive. So the district would go to great lengths to really do what they could to prevent kids from getting those services. Then we evolved kind of into, when you hear all the wrongdoing that's happening behind the scenes with that, and we got vocal about it, and there were issues like unreported sexual assaults at the middle school, all kinds of stuff that would be brought to us, and we thoroughly vet anything that we share, but we think it's really important for people to understand what's going on. We know these things, and we're not just us. There are a lot of parents and teachers in the district who know these things. Through it's just proximity. If you're involved, you see things, and when you start asking questions or you start attending the school committee meetings, that's when you start seeing how these things aren't going the way they should. So ultimately what would end up happening is we started to bring to light some of the issues that we were having, and that would go along the lines of impropriety. There are things that whether it's oh God, what happened with the chair of our school committee, and bear with me 1 second, Pax, I'm gonna do something to the power here. So things like what happened to 2 middle school students being suspended for an extended period of time. Those are things we wanted to share with people so they were aware what's happening. And you'd be amazed how much more information you get when you start sharing these things. So that's really, I know a lot of people see us as negative. Certainly me. I know people might not like my style. I'm passionate about this stuff, and that certainly comes through. I also have an intolerance for being lied to. I don't like seeing things happen when kids are paying the price for it. So that's really the driver. And so that's kind of where we've gotten to where we are. We were vocal about our previous superintendent. With the current superintendent, if you go back and look at our group, we're actually very positive about him. And we pumped his tires for quite some time until he felt that the way we operate wasn't conducive to his relationships with the school committee, who he reports to, and BWEF, Bristol-Warren Education Foundation, which does a lot of work in the district. So, I understand where people get that perception. It stinks a little bit just because it undermines a lot of the good work that people are doing behind the scenes, the very positive stuff. I get it. We share, what's going on, the dark stuff, and it's frustrating and it's not positive. And we get, I certainly hear a lot that people want me to be more positive about this stuff. I'll take feedback. If somebody has a way that we can do this and, have a smiley face when we're doing it, fine. But this is really, it's negative stuff, and it's stuff that people should get angry about. Being angry isn't a bad thing as long as it's controlled. But when you hear the frustration in parents' voices and even staff, faculty and staff, there are people who reach out to us and tell us their stories about what's happening behind the scenes and their frustration with it, how they might not be getting funding for what they're doing and supplies and the way things are going, in the classroom and in the schools, and certainly in the administration building. So that's really where we are now. With the pandemic and the impact of that, certainly bullying dropped off the radar for the most part, and I'm sure when kids are in a classroom environment again, that'll pick up. The IEP stuff, while I think there's probably more of a need for us now more than ever, because from what we're hearing, the level of drop off for certainly kids with IEPs has been tremendous. And I mean, for the average parent, and I have 3, it's difficult. The distance learning stuff is really difficult. And, some kids respond well to it, some don't. I have, this year I have 3 middle schoolers, but I can't even fathom what it's like having one or multiple elementary school kids where, my kids can manage themselves, through their assignments. But, to have kids who by their very nature aren't meant to sit in one spot for an extended period of time. And when they're not in that classroom environment, they don't respond the same, and they're not going to behave the same. The lines are blurred between classroom and home. And so it's very difficult for parents of elementary school kids to really keep them focused. But the IEP stuff right now, from what we're hearing, is absolutely atrocious as far as, not only the fact that there's this drop off in services, but also kind of the district's reaction to it. And they've kind of just thrown up their hands and said, it is what it is, and you're just not going to get these things. That's really troubling. So that's kind of who we are and how we got here. Like I said, I think there's a lot of misnomers about what the group does. But yeah, we'll continue so long as we hear these things. I think it's important for people to hear these things. And I know there's a little bit of shoot the messenger. And that's fine. We know we're trying to do the right thing for the right reasons. And again, people might not like my style. It's very direct, and I don't like bullshit. So when people are trying to sell us a line of crap, we're not just going to take it and go away. We're going to ask the questions. And when you start doing that and you hear and you know what's going on behind the scenes, you can't not do something about it. It's very difficult. So that's kind of our group and how we've gotten to where we are today.
Daryl, you ready to take calls? Anyone wants to call in?
Sure.
All right, so folks, the phone number, this is just like any talk radio station, 401-205-3738. If you've got calls or questions you'd like to make. I know, Daryl, there's a lot of issues that you want to bring people up to speed on in terms of conversations about rehashing what was actually accomplished with distance learning, what some of the challenges were there. And I know that we've got a brave new world from us in just 2 months or so. It seems like it's an eternity, but in mid-August, teachers are going to start showing up somewhere. They're going to start preparing for something, and if you're like most teachers, you're probably going to be working all summer to try and adapt to the brave new world. You've got teachers in school systems like Bristol-Warren who've been doing it for 30 years and are accomplished professionals at working with children, but have learned to do so with direct eye contact, with sitting over someone's shoulder and leading them through step by step an exercise that they may be having difficulty with. We've had a few months now in terms of the online training and the online, I'll call it training by fire or trial by fire, if you will. What are folks' assessments of this, of how the rest of the year went, and what challenges is a school district like Bristol-Warren facing going forward?
So, and so like I said, it's kind of a mixed bag for people. And you obviously social media doesn't show you everybody's experience, but there's certainly a broad spectrum that people shared there. And that ranged anywhere from absolute frustration and a severe drop off in performance to other kids that have done very well. Every kid's different. They all learn differently. And what's funny is I know a family that they have 2 children in the district, and one tends to be very social and the other isn't. And when we went to, the social student did very well in the classroom environment. The others, their less social student just kind of kept themselves, didn't do as well. And then when there was a switch to distance learning, all of a sudden the student that may not have been as socially active, that student excelled because they didn't, the socialization was more of a distraction for them, where their student who, was more of a social butterfly, for lack of a better term, but when all of a sudden you're in isolation and you don't have that social experience, that student's grades dropped. So every kid, and this is within the same household, so every kid responds differently to this stuff. It's been troubling. There's a lot of different platforms. There are tech issues. The Chromebooks are a nightmare. They're not necessarily a robust piece of equipment, so they're difficult to begin with. But I'll tell you, from my experience with my 3 kids, my daughter did very well. My daughter's very mature. She can self-manage and make her way through these things. She's highly responsible and she's a high performer. My boys, less so. They had my boys were in the classroom environment because they had, the teacher right there. They needed somebody who was keeping them on task, to be perfectly frank. And when we switched to distance learning, there was a certain level of trust I had in them to be doing their work. I can look in Aspen, which is the database that we have for our students' grades and assignments and stuff. But you have to understand that teachers might not even be necessarily entering that stuff in right away. So while it's not necessarily a great tool to measure or to get some visibility into precisely where your student is at any given point in time, it could be updated, it might not. So I let my boys, I gave them a lot of rope, and they, ultimately I was contacted by the school, and, we had to circle the wagons with the teachers, their team, and they were tremendous. They were very helpful. They were also very flexible with things. My boys had some assignments they hadn't done. They hadn't necessarily been honest with me about how diligent they were with their schoolwork. And ultimately it came to a head where they were doing really poorly grade-wise. So credit to school. I that's one thing I want to clarify. There's very little we do as far as frustration with teachers. And I know that people try and ding us for that we have nothing to say about good to say about teachers, the administration. A lot of our frustration lies with the administration, and the teachers, like anything else, they're good and bad. My experience is everybody's been very cooperative and helpful. So I know that there might not, not everybody has that experience, but with distance learning, when I needed the teachers and the guidance counselors and stuff to help us get through it, they were there. They were proactive about it. They reached out and said, "Here's what's going on." I had to sit down with the boys and identify a plan for them. I thought it was very important that they caught up on all their work because it was assigned, and whether it was they were going to grade for it or not because it may have been old work, that's irrelevant to me. There's a cumulative effect with this stuff, and there's also an obligation. This is the work you were given. You're obligated to do it, and so that's what my boys have been doing for the better part of the last probably 3 weeks. Is not only their core work that they're assigned on a daily basis, but also trying to catch up. So I saw, again, within my house, I saw both ends of the spectrum. And I can't even imagine what it's like. I've heard the horror stories of some parents of elementary school kids where it's very difficult to keep them engaged. And especially when, some of these parents are essential workers and they're working out of home. So they're trying to do their job and, be a parent and teacher all at the same time. And it's very, very difficult. So, the distance learning thing, excuse me, really that's one of my concerns is what that's going to look like for next year. And so why don't we transition into that? So, the 2020-2021 school year, there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know where we're going to be as far as the governor's concerned and what this all looks like. My hope, especially given her recent behavior with, being in crowds of 10,000 without a mask and holding hands and such, and basically violating all of her social distancing rules that she enforces on us. I'm hoping things get loosened up. But the reality is we may be going into the next school year with some kind of hybrid combination between in-school and distance learning. Dr. Bryce, our superintendent, did have a Zoom meeting with the parents group of Colt Andrews, one of our elementary schools in Bristol. And unfortunately, it was something where it wasn't a true Q&A. You could submit questions beforehand and they'd be vetted, and I don't believe there was an opportunity for secondary questions. So it's very scripted, and there's a lot of control over the direction of the conversation. But the subject of what next year looks like did come up, and things like this district might not be able to afford to have buses because with social distancing, it'd be 22 kids on a bus. So theoretically, it would at least double the amount of busing that we would require. And Dr. Bryce said there's just no money for it. We've heard things like, or he mentioned rather, there might be one Chromebook per family. As someone with 3 kids who are in the same grade, I don't know how that's supposed to work. My hope, especially in the transportation thing, I just can't believe that that's a reality. They are talking about, staggered school days, and then, these are really, I know that everybody's just waiting to get through the school year, and it's been, not just school, but everything else around us has been a nightmare. There have been like wholesale changes with how we deal with things on a daily basis. So this, I know that when, everybody's looking forward to the end of the school year, but this is really something that people need to pay attention to, because these are the questions we need to ask so we are prepared. I know families that if they're looking at distance learning next year, they're likely going to homeschool. They might go private. That might be something I explore as well. I don't, as great as our teachers are, this, none of their experience is based in this, and they did a great job given the circumstances. But unless we see a whole lot, and it's just, again, we got a summer to get through this. So I don't see how, there's drastic changes in, the technology that's available to us, and how this all works. So my hope is that we return to a traditional school year where everybody's in the buildings, but I don't think that's the case, and I think people really need to stay engaged this year more than ever. I don't say that over summers. I understand it's a wonderful time where we can take a break from this stuff, at least most of us. But there's going to be some stuff coming down the pike, and trust me, you're not going to hear it until it's too late. And so if you want to have a voice, you really have to pay attention. That's why we do what we do here. We want to share this stuff. You're hearing this from us. The Dr. Bryce shared this with some parents, but there isn't an open dialogue. And if you go to our school committee meetings, that's not the place for these things. It's generally a one-way street, and as far as communication is concerned, unless you're on the agenda, and even then, you're not going to get a real true Q&A that I think a lot of parents, we're going to have a lot of questions. How does this look? What does it impact? What grades are going to do what? And how are we, when we're all returning to work, how is this all supposed to work together? So I think that it's really important for people to pay attention this summer, ask the questions. We've already seen some stuff happening behind the scenes that is troubling, especially given, I understand that there are certain things we have to do because of the restrictions that the government's putting on us. But there's also, when you talk about budget, for example, there's been, this district got fully funded, and we have a surplus that Dr. Bryce earmarked $1 million of, 2/3 of it, $1 million of 1.5 towards protecting teacher salaries, which is great. But then all of a sudden we start chopping teachers, and we're hiring administrative positions, and our district is really heavy on the administrative side. You start looking at, like a lot of districts our size don't have an assistant superintendent, and then have all these, heads of, department heads on top of that, operational officers and things like that. So we're really top heavy. It's one of the first places I think we could make, see some savings. My hope is, if there are cuts, that's where they take place. I don't like seeing it happen at the school level. It shouldn't, because again, the district got all the money they requested. There's a surplus. The towns, Dr. Bryce in meetings has tried to hang his hat on almost putting it on the towns as far as, I don't know how much, I don't know. We don't know if they're going to meet the commitment to fund the district, that they made during the JFC. The towns, agreed, they voted and they agreed to doing that. So that's not going to, they have to do that. And Nathan Caluro, who sits on the town council of Bristol, is very vocal about that. He said, this is an obligation we made. We voted on this during JFC. We know what the state funding is. So we know what we have for funding. There is not this uncertainty or ambiguity around how much funding we're getting. And so when he uses that as an excuse, I get a little bit concerned. And I have trust issues with Dr. Bryce. There are a lot of things that have happened that, behaviorally, that I think is not becoming of someone who's a leader of our district. I caught a little flack because we shared, you know, we were talking about Dr. Bryce had gone down when the pandemic hit. Dr. Bryce went to Baltimore to be with his family for like 9 or 10 weeks, and when he returned to the district, he didn't quarantine himself as required under Phase 1, and returned right to work in the administrative building. Now, at its surface, this seems petty, but what you have to understand is, the bringing this up as a topic of conversation was based upon the fact that, during this whole pandemic, there were a lot of decisions made by the administration and Dr. Bryce that really were done under the flag of we have to follow the rules. These are the governor's guidelines. We have to follow the rules, follow the rules, follow the rules. And much like the governor going out and holding hands and not following social distancing guidelines during protests, Dr. Bryce didn't follow the rules when he came back. And the problem I have with that is the senior class this year, for example, their graduation was butchered. And there were parents who reached out and had conference calls with Dr. Bryce and I believe Aaron Schofield to discuss different options. And we saw what a lot of other communities did. The other day I drove through Barrington and they shut down the county road in Barrington for a short period of time and had a parade, basically like a car parade for their seniors. The streets were lined with people holding signs and balloons and waving. I mean, was it the graduation they had hoped for? No, but the district over there certainly worked with the parents and said, let's try and do the best we can. And they did something. And as I rolled through there and I saw the people lined up and down the streets, I thought, this is really nice of them to do. And so, everybody's trying to put their input, and they were just shot down. And again, the response they kept getting is we have to follow the governor's rules. And I have a problem with the hypocrisy of it. The whole, rules are for thee, not for ye. These are rules that these people, shoved down our throat and use as justification for the decisions. But when it comes time where it impacts them, there's an inconsistency there. And I think that does warrant talking about. And I've seen other behavior like that, from the administration and such. And again, that's why we talk about these things. So again, to get back to what next year is going to look like, my hope is that I can't imagine a world where we don't provide transportation. But again, I don't know if it's a scare tactic on the administration's part, but they brought it up and put it out there. So, we share it in order to get, and honestly, there were a lot of people, I had some people who were bus monitors and bus drivers who hadn't heard it. Some of them were, some of them weren't surprised by that. That's the information. The bad news is the stuff they're going to give you at the 11th hour, where you don't have a chance to fight the fight and advocate against it. They just want to roll these things out and not be questioned or contested. And that's not the way that our district should be run. At the end of the day, I'm not one of those people who's like, I pay your salary, you work for me, but you are elected and public officials. And there is an element of that. We do have a say, and we do have a right to ask questions and find out what's going on. So, one of the things, Pat, that I wanted to talk about was, talking about, later this year is the elections for school committee. And, I'm going to sound like everyone when they're talking about presidential races every 4 years. This is a very important year. We actually have 3 seats up in Bristol and 2 seats up in Warren. The seats up in Bristol are Ramus, Bradshaw, and McBride. I'm not going to get too deep into the candidates themselves and who they are and what we should do. I know we have time to do that over the next couple months. And on the Warren side, it's Saviano and Bento. So there are 5 seats up, And it's my understanding that there's some individuals like Nikki Piper, who is the chair of BWF. She's likely going to run. Marnie Kindness, who I believe is also BWF. She might run, and Tamara Kaplan. And people may have seen Tamara. She was the community person. So when we do JFC, they have someone from the community sit. I don't believe they're a voting member, but they get to ask questions during JFC. Is kind of like the parent, the true parent, non-committee, non-council member who can be a part of that process. So people may have seen Tamara during that process. So, my concern with that is, they're all BWF or BWF associated people. I've been very vocal about my opinions on that group and in what I call interference in our district. I don't like seeing people advocate for their own children at the expense of others. And I think that's a lot of what happens. And that's the inequity that bothers me. I don't like seeing, I'm all about lifting kids up, but we got to lift everybody up. It's not just our kids, and it's not just about, our kids' experience. One of the things I hear a lot of times we talk about these things is, Bristol-Warren is a fantastic school district, and my student went on to, an Ivy League school, and they have a very, lucrative career. That's fine, but we can't just look through the lens of your success story. Not every kid's home life is different. Is the same, obviously. So you have those factors, and we need to be worried about the kids on the bottom and making sure they're getting what they need. Not that we want to. I'd love to see everybody lifted up, but there are some kids that, no matter what, are going to be just fine. And so, we really need to make sure that if there's an emphasis, it's helping the kids that need as much input as possible to get them through this successfully. So that's. So my hope is that people will run. Again, I put it out there. I know I've heard rumblings. I've talked to a couple of people, and I believe there are some that will. And as that process takes place, we'll certainly we'll share what our thoughts are in the candidates, and strengths and weaknesses and concerns. As we make our way through that process. So again, to get back to, to recent events, so we've had, Dr. Bryce returning from Maryland and not putting himself in quarantine. We actually saw what was interesting was, given all the unrest with, racial tension and issues in society in America today, the district sent out an email at the end of the week talking about how important equality is, and how they focus on this, and they shared their equality policy. But it begs the questions, and we had this in a Facebook post. How many people in our district, from an administrative, faculty, and staff standpoint, are people of color? To my knowledge, and no one has pointed out anyone else, I think it's only Dr. Bryce. I've also talked to families who have students who are, either of some, of color of some sort, brown, black, yellow, whatever, and they've expressed some frustration with, that message coming out, and just wondering, really, what has the district done? We do have, I believe, somewhere around 20 to 25, students who are who would qualify, and shouldn't our provided that we're hiring qualified people, obviously, but shouldn't there be wouldn't it be nice for some of these kids to be taught by people who look like them too? It's something that, if they're going to bring it up and talk about how they're trying to do the right thing, and how important this is, I think it's really important to walk the walk. And, I don't think that's something that our group does. We're going to call out that stuff, and, see if see if they're willing to work with us, or ask questions to get them to realize that people are watching and they can't just mail it in on these things. We're going to make them walk the walk, certainly if it's something that they brought the conversation up. So I don't know. I can't see the comments, Pat. So I don't know if there's anyone commenting or with any questions or anything.
Let me. Corey says, "I was so saddened by the amount of students of color that have said they were bullied because of their color, and the district did nothing for them." That's pretty confounding, Daryl. What are your thoughts on that?
And that's some of that. And we've dealt with some of these families, and I will say this. A lot of what happened there happened under the previous superintendent, Dr. Andrade. I'm not saying that it hasn't happened under Dr. Bryce, but a lot of these things are kind of historical things that didn't correct it. Maybe, Dr. Bryce has only been at the helm of the district for a year, not even. It's going on, it'll be a year, I believe it's July. So, a lot of these things, it's old business. Not that it doesn't sting, or not that it didn't happen, but it's not something. My hope was that when Dr. Bryce landed, I knew some families who have students that are mixed or whatever, and they said they were really happy when it was nice to have a strong black man at the head of our district, and it was someone that their kids could look up to. And further down the road, those things didn't come to fruition like those families had hoped, and it was it was kind of disappointing for them. So I get it, but again, some of the hardcore stuff that we hear that on our end, it may have happened a while ago, but it's unacceptable stuff, and that's something that, as a society, I'm not going to put it totally on the schools to handle that. Those things start at home, and they're conversations that need to be had. But these are the difficult conversations that people avoid because they're uncomfortable. Those are conversations that we like to be a part of. Growth comes from discomfort. I say it to my kids all the time. When you talk about, lobsters, when they molt their shell, that happens when they outgrow the shell they're in, and it's very uncomfortable for them. So they have to shed it and create a new one. So, but that growth comes from discomfort. And I think there's a hyper emphasis on being positive, that, in my opinion, is akin to whistling by the graveyard. Being positive and ignoring problems is not a way to fix things. And based upon some of the problems we have, some of these things are willful. They're by design. They're on purpose. So people are intentionally hiding information or doing certain things. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. I hear a lot of behavioral stuff, and there's a ton of stuff. And I've said this before. There's a ton of stuff we don't share. I don't get into the, what administrator is having an affair with what teacher. That stuff's garbage as far as I'm concerned. If that's happening, that's a personnel issue within the district, and not something that's not what we do. It's not on my radar. It's, that's just drama and noise. We really try and focus on, again, the things that are impacting the kids. My hope was over time, we'd see some systemic change, and we haven't. And I think, I'm somewhat of the opinion it doesn't really matter a ton who our superintendent is, because ultimately the school committee is driving the bus here. But I think we went, honestly, from a superintendent who was maybe lacked conviction, is probably a nice way of putting it. And not necessarily a driven, principled individual. And so we went from maybe inept to corrupt. I have some problems with the way things are going right now. And I think if anybody looks at it at its surface, the hypocrisy, the misinformation, the tone of the district. We've had families who were reached, the district is looking at student social media accounts and reaching out to families and saying, the post on your page wasn't positive and you really should be more supportive of the school district. Garbage in, garbage out. You get what you give. And so, I think it's comical that the district is going to reach out to parents and ask them to change their tone on things when they're just reacting to their experience with whether it's graduation or some kind of disciplinary issue. This stuff. So again, I would hope that over time we would see some systemic change and improvement. And there's been a little bit, but I think our group tends to help people more on a case-by-case basis. If you have a student who has an IEP and they need some help, we have a great group of people who, will walk them through the process and advocate for them, and people are appreciative. And that stuff, it involves minor children, so we're not going to trumpet that stuff. That's behind the scenes. That's family stuff. We're very careful with information that we share. It's anyone who reaches out to us, everything's in total confidence, which is why we continue to get information from people. We don't share names unless people tell us to, or that we're, really want us to. And again, there's a lot of stuff that we won't share just because it's not the nature of, how we want to communicate. We might use it as an example, and we certainly do that, but we're not going to do it by naming names. And again, we get a lot of information from faculty and staff. I hear about Dr. Bryce's behavior in meetings. When he doesn't get his way, he gets pissed, and he'll slam the table and yell and this and that. And he's a chameleon. He does a great job of being the very personable and charismatic guy when he's meeting with parents, and he's obviously highly educated, going to Harvard and such. So he's a smart guy, and but he doesn't do well under pressure. And when people push, his reaction is often telling as to what his true thoughts or intentions are. And oftentimes it's in conflict with the parents. And the meeting that I talked about, the parents group, when people start asking questions, he abruptly ended the call. And I believe that also happened with a group of parents who were on a con call with him, regarding the graduation and the different options that they were proposing. He got frustrated with it and abruptly ended the call. Again, this isn't, it's not the behavior you want to see from somebody, and they really should be listening to us. I know that there's an element of the pitchforks and torches and stuff, but this wasn't the case with this stuff, And if you're dropping bombs like there might not be busing next year, and you might have one Chromebook per household, you're gonna get a reaction, and people are nervous. We want to know what this looks like, and are people going to be driving their kids to school next year? Are their kids? We don't even know if they're going to be in the classroom. So my hope is that the district really bumps up their communication, and it starts sharing a lot of these things. I know it's difficult. They don't want to do things when it's not fully cooked, because it can make a mess of things and you end up with too many cooks in the kitchen. But we deserve some input on these things. These are our schools. These are our children. And we want to have a say as to how these things go. We want our voices heard, because a lot of the times, you see things get rolled out without that feedback from parents. And almost immediately there's a situation to say, well, what about X? And it's just because the district didn't consider something from the parents or students' point of view, some circumstance or something. And so that input is valuable, and is valuable also from a cooperative standpoint. Everybody wants to work with the district, and so long as they're behaving themselves, there's no reason why that can't be a cooperative relationship moving forward. But like I said before, I think it's really important that people pay attention to what's going on, ask questions. I'll do these with you, Pat, provided you allow me to. Maybe a couple of weeks or once a month or something. But we're talking very quickly. We're going to be into next year, so and we don't hear everything. So we need to really, everybody needs to be asking the district what's happening with these things. Reach out to Dr. Bryce, reach out to the school committee, let them know, what your opinions are. And, who knows, maybe based upon the responses you get, that'll start helping make up your mind regarding who you might want to vote for this fall. So this stuff's all tied together, obviously.
Daryl, we got a couple more questions.
Daryl, we got a couple more questions from the
audio.
audio.
Get a little feedback here. The district has published goals, if you will, where they want to be a top, let's just say within a top category of student performance.
Yep.
Number one, is that achievable in your opinion, in the opinion of folks that you work with as advocates? And number two, doesn't the arbitrary setting of goals in effect create the opportunity for, I'm searching for a good word. The person who private messaged me was pretty blunt, but there's been accusations levied in the past that IEPs were hush-hushed and numbers were adjusted in order to provide a level of performance that may not have been entirely accurate. What's more important, a quality education along every student performance threshold, or this arbitrary cheerleading for a particular number to rise your standing around the state? What are your thoughts?
So, what the person's likely talking about is the Dr. Bryce's, we're going to be a top 5 district in the next 5 years. And, my question about that during one of our school committee meetings was really because Dr. Bryce, when he talked about it, he said, we wouldn't there are other metrics other than state rank that we would look at to determine if our school district is a top 5 and 5 district, or top 5 district. So I asked the question, if we're not following the state assessments and such, which is what every district does, what measuring stick are we using? This, top 5 and 5 sounds nice. It's a slogan. And I know it's something that it's positive and it's ambitious and that's great. But we also have to, we can't be bullshitting the parents that, this is all of a sudden going to turn around. I mean, the reality of it is, we're middle of the pack. I think we rank in the state, I think it's 18. So, to go from 18 up to top 5, and let's be honest about it, for probably the top 2 to 3, they're not moving. We're not gonna beat Barrington. We're not gonna beat East G. So really, we're saying, we're hoping we can get, top 3, 4, or 5 in the next 5 years. But even then, that's a tough road to hoe. And I personally don't see it happening. And my concerns were when asked about it, the response was, and again, this is during a school committee meeting, so it's not that back and forth. But Dr. Bryce said, when I walk down our hallways, I see, teachers teaching and students learning, and that's the mark of a good district. That is not something measurable. That is something that sounds really nice, and it pumps the tires of the students and it pumps the tires of the teachers. I'm not saying that's not deserved, but I just don't, that's not, when people are sidestepping questions like that, if everything you do is under this, we're going to be a top 5 and 5, and that's why we're making these choices and these decisions. Again, we're going to ask you to be consistent, and we all want to follow along. And I want to know that, for example, our standardized test scores, 25% of our students are proficient in math and 33 are proficient in reading and language skills. What are some goals there? What levels of proficiency? I mean, I think that's atrocious. And that said, I understand that standardized testing is not necessarily a great measurement for every student. But if this is the tool that they're using and they hang their hat on, and it's the only one we have, then yeah, that's what we got to go by. So, that in my mind, to have a quarter or a third of our students not performing at grade level proficiency, I'm sorry to say it's a failed district. It's not the teacher's fault. It's not the student's fault. A lot of this, again, is going to fall on the administration. It's the decisions they make, the resources they give their teachers, the climate. We've had different administrators, different principals and superintendents. Some of these people rule with an iron fist. Other very laid back, and it's a mixed bag. But we need to see some consistency, and we need to see some transparency. That'd be the big one for our district. So I love the positivity and the striving towards that goal. But when you say, all right, what do you mean by top 5? And they're like, well, and they do a little song and dance, that's when I start getting a little bit nervous about, are we just being sold some slogan? And we're going to get, 5 years down the road. Because the reality is, especially with my kids won't see any of this. My daughter's entering high school and my boys are entering hopefully 7th grade. They're not, if things get fixed, they're not going to see the benefits of it. I'll still be here doing what I do because I think it's important, and there are other people in this district that I care about, and I want to see good things happen for them. But this is, again, these are the questions that people need to ask, and demand answers. And just because you get an answer doesn't mean that the question is being answered. Like I said, the example I gave with Dr. Bryce and the what measurement we're going to use. Those are things that we need to pay attention to. And again, those are the questions that should be asked. I know that, like everywhere, we're going to see the pandemic being used as an excuse, for certain decisions being made. Sometimes that's fair and accurate, and I think other times it's just that it's going to be an excuse. So I'm sure we might hear at some point, we were on track for top 5 and 5, but now it's, because of the pandemic and distance learning, and I can't see that our district is going to perform better under these circumstances. That's not the overall, tone of what I think's happened. But we'll see. So again, that's another area where, pay attention and ask questions. And when people say top 5 and 5, ask them what they mean and how are we going to get there? It's nice to throw out there when you're asking to get your district fully funded, but where's and then to have all these teachers get cut and it's. I'll be honest with you, I advocated against, I said we should be pumping the brakes, certainly because of the pandemic as far as fully funding. And I think there's a lot of things financially we need to look into in our district before we fully fund it. There are people who believe that the more money you spend on your district, the better education you're going to get. And that's not the case. But it feels good to say, to advocate for let's fully fund this district, or this is the next generation, and you'll hear all that stuff. And not that there isn't some element of truth to it. But I'd be upset if I was one of the people who, advocated for the district to be fully funded, and then as soon as it happens, you turn around and, cuts are being made that you would think weren't happening as a result of, the district being fully funded. So again, another area where people need to ask questions. I'd be pissed if I advocated for that stuff and all of a sudden the district turned around and started slashing people, and was hiring administrative positions, and we had the surplus and everything else. So again, it's just some contradictory stuff there that people need to ask questions about.
Daryl, well, first of all, I want to tell folks if they want to call in by phone, you can, 401-205-3738. We had a couple of people call in. Just give us a minute or so. Sometimes Daryl's in the middle of an explanation or a question. Also, you can type in your questions into the chat. We will see them. We will ask our guest, Daryl Gould, who's joining us tonight as an advocate for the Bristol-Warren School District. We will give him an opportunity to respond if you'd prefer just to type them in the chat. We've had another individual type in. They want to talk about the money that was saved via busing, and I think that was Tammy. There was a significant amount of money saved in busing, and I would imagine there were actual other savings that were realized, actual hard dollar savings. I'm just editorializing on this, whether it be electricity, supplies. There were a number of things that weren't spent. What happened to all that money? and how can it be used?
Well, yeah, so our district reportedly, this came from them, there was $1.5 million in savings. I think a large chunk of that was the, not needing to, forgive me, I have an English bulldog with the phone. A lot of it was surrounded busing. There were a lot of savings there. So our district had a $1.5 million surplus, and Dr. Bryce during a recent meeting said that would $1 million of that would be earmarked to protect teacher salaries. I don't know, based upon what happened with teachers being cut, and I understand, when we say things like that, I know there are a lot of teachers because they go through it every year. Pink slips are a natural part of being a teacher, certainly one without tenure in any public school. And it's not uncommon for a teacher to receive a pink slip and be rehired for that following school year. Again, we don't have a full clear picture. Again, lack of transparency on behalf of the district. But some of these changes were actual cuts. So for example, our middle school is going to get rid of their team system, which lessens their requirement for staffing. It also is going to increase, from what I heard, our class size to possibly up to 30 students. But again, we don't even know what that's going to look like with distance learning and the impact of the pandemic. But yeah, so there's $1.5 million that was surplus. If they're not using it for teacher salaries because they're chopping there, and they certainly have some extra money because they're hiring administrative positions, then one would think that for the upcoming year, those funds could be allocated towards busing. And again, I have a hard time believing, and I don't know why they would say that unless it was a reality, because that one's gonna trigger people. If you're a parent, and I mean, I'm in a fortunate position where I'm self-employed, so I can make, and I have for the last probably two years. I've made a point of being there when I have my kids. I bring them to school and I pick them up every day. Not everybody can do that, and I totally get that. So maybe this $1.5 million, if they didn't use it for to preserve teacher salaries or protect them, then maybe it's something that it gets allocated towards transportation for the next year. But that's, again, that's something where, I think the bus drivers and the monitors have every right to ask. It's a little difficult there because they work for a private company for a student. So they might have to go to their employer, but a lot of these people are also parents in the district. So, and you're a taxpayer. You don't have to, if you live in this district, you're paying taxes for it. You have every right to ask. So these are the questions that people should be reaching out to district and saying, hey, listen, we know you mentioned that, there might not be school buses next year. What does that look like? And what do we need to do to prepare? Do we need to do co-ops with different families? Or, is it something where, there might be a group of families or whatever that pool their money together and have arrange for transportation, or do like a ride share type thing. But these are, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense looking into it and stressing out over it if we don't know what it looks like. And I know that they might not know themselves, but if they're far enough down the path where they're sharing information like that, then they have a pretty good idea. And this is where they really need to, if they want to earn the trust of the people in this district, they need to be honest about it. And that needs to be a cooperative dialogue. These aren't things that should be happening in the back room between Dr. Bryce and the school committee. We all should be aware of what's going on so we can prepare. This is our school district.
Speaking of administrative hires, has there been an expansion of administrative staff in the past few months? Have additional significant hires been made?
Yeah, there's and so what we found out, because there were a couple of people who came in and they weren't, any position hired by the district has to be put in front of the school committee. What we discovered was there is an exception if that is a consultant and it's a contract position. So there were a couple of positions that were hired, and there appeared to be some nepotism there with Dr. Bryce. a former schoolmate at Harvard. The concerning one was Dr. Anthony Pope, and we talked about that before. But if you Google this guy, you'll see some information about him being in Marlboro, and the behavior was ridiculous. He was run out of town. And the school committee said there was financial impropriety and misrepresentation, and he was belligerent, and he wouldn't answer for his decisions to the school committee. And there was an incident where he showed up on school grounds and made threats at students, and just behavior that is absolutely unacceptable from an adult, never mind someone who's purportedly a leader in a district. So if you read the background on that guy, the fact that he was brought in was, I don't know. There's no justification for it. So things like that happen. We also did just hire an interim business manager. Again, we're very top heavy, and when we're looking at making cuts everywhere, one of the areas that we're also very heavy is the IT department. Our IT budget was at least two times Barrington's, and it's not like we're some technical hotspot or something like that. I don't see us being very advanced in that space if we're even on par with what Barrington does. So, that's administrative personnel is always going to be someplace where they're all difficult decisions, but it's an easy place to make a cut. I'd rather see a cut there than somewhere in a classroom. It's the direct impact on the student is just not going to be there. And by all appearances, if these are qualified, capable professionals, and there's no reason to think that most, if not all of them are, then they should be able to do these jobs in line with the personnel and staffing of other districts our size. And where, like I said, we're very top heavy there. So, there's some weird things about how these positions get posted and such, and I don't know the reasons behind it. There's always legal things and union issues that you deal with, when you talk about these types of positions. So that's going to be a factor. But I think there needs to be a critical eye looking at the balance of our district, and it is very top heavy.
How accessible is the actual school budget as it's been proposed for 2020 to 2021 for parents, taxpayers, stakeholders, as they say? Is that publicly available now?
It is. And all this stuff, you can do FERPA requests. So basically now to say it's available, yes, that, if your aptitude as far as budgets and finance isn't really high, it's a quagmire. We're talking about, I forget how many pages it was. 80 pages of numbers in 9-point font when you print it out. And I had someone on our team actually did that at one point. And I'm sure the ink tone manufacturers appreciated that. But all this stuff's accessible. We've been calling for a forensic audit for years, because we do know there is some impropriety and some of the number stuff doesn't make sense. And I think it's important to have a good financial foundation and not a lot of smoke and mirrors. And if money isn't going where it is intended, or isn't being used as it's supposed to, then those things need to be looked at. And the people who are, playing in that space need to be held accountable for their decisions. But it's available. It's very, very detailed information. And it's something that, again, if you don't have a really serious financial background and a whole lot of free time, it's just not something you're going to get through. It's why forensic audits are so expensive. But to her credit, Sheila Ellsworth, who's on our school committee, she actually does have a financial background, which is why she's really a lot of times the lone voice when it comes to the numbers. It sounds like, at least based upon some statements in school committee meetings, that because she does have that capability and she is asking questions, the administration might not be providing her with information she's requesting, because they know that she has the ability to actually see through the numbers and see what's going on. And Sheila's convicted. I give her a lot of credit. She's consistent, and she works really hard. And where she is, one area where she's just a tremendous asset above and beyond everybody else is, again, that financial background, that experience. She's she's always there asking questions. You can tell she deep dives into it. She's not lazy about it at all. And she really advocates for not just students. She advocates for the taxpayers. She understands that, when they're asking for money, it's of the taxpayers, not just the families in the district. So she, that's not something that's lost on her, and she behaves as such. She walks the walk. So I love Sheila. She's fantastic. And she's consistent. She also doesn't, advocate just for her students, but as far as the numbers issues, there's nobody that's as good as she is. And I think we need people like that who, there are certainly people who would ask the questions, but if you don't know what questions to ask, then you're not going to get very far. And Sheila has both, which is fantastic for all of us, because otherwise those questions would be asked.
But in the year 2020, and this is actually me interjecting, in the year 2020, how is it possible that, say, let's just take June as for example, that by July 15th, a monthly P&L, or a profit and loss, if you will, or a cash flow statement, an expenditure statement, isn't available and isn't simply just put on a town website? It's with the opportunity to drill down if necessary. But again, this is from a public information status. This is simple stuff. We're not talking complexity here.
No, and that lends to the transparency issue. If transparency is a really nice word that you can throw around, but if you're not, again, I say walking the walk. I say it all the time. If you're not walking the walk, then it's just a slogan. You're not. Transparency is only as good as the people holding the information and their willingness to share it. And our district is not the best in that space, unfortunately.
We've got a couple of folks who've joined the chat recently, and I'm going to throw a question out there. I'm going to interject myself. I don't live in Bristol-Warren. I live up in Cumberland. So Kaylee, and if I pronounce your name wrong, please excuse me, and Karen are talking about the busing issue again. So I'm going to ask their question, but I'm also going to frame it. For years now, the sacred cow for many school districts in what we'll call normal times has been athletics. And right out of the official superintendent/school board playbook has been, when money gets tight, we're going to cut football. It's almost like a standing headline. Or we're going to cut basketball. Whatever sport that school district happens to be a recent champion of, we're just going to cut it. Mm-hmm. And of course, then there's a collective nervous breakdown. The entire town shows up. They protest it, and the quid pro quo is we're going to increase taxes. My sense as an outsider, but someone who pays attention, is that instead of football, because in these days, I don't know, given the nature of the crisis that has instigated a budget crisis, if cutting sports is going to get that same emotional effect. Busing, on the other hand, to your point, holy cow. Again, you've got, by definition, the overwhelming costs of raising a family in Rhode Island in the year 2020 have led to many parents being not only both employed, but in many cases, you and me personally, you've got parents, a father or a mother maybe having one or two jobs, and if in fact it's even a two-parent family, the other parent pursuing shift work or being forced into the same type of work where there's overlap. These are trying times, and these are all good people who are working very, very hard. So the notion of pulling busing out from underneath underneath them is terrifying. So Callie I came in a little late, but I think they are trying to cut buses altogether. Karen had asked longer bus runs then, any mention of that. And actually, Callie, please tell me if I'm mispronouncing your name. She's chatting with me in real time. Gotta love the Facebook. I am a parent in the district and also a driver. Talk about an emotional stake in this, and a financial and a personal stake in this. And she's looking to your group right now for information. Let's comment on the whole picture.
We will share information as we get it. And this is an easy one. This isn't the backroom stuff that we get. This is really surface level. This is something every parent, it's going to impact the vast majority of students in this district and families in this district. So this is something where, our school district needs to, our superintendent needs to do a town hall or something where he's willing to answer questions. I think if monitored properly, that could be a productive dialogue. I certainly understand how it can go sideways. And it's because there's going to be a lot, if it is in fact a situation where we aren't going to have buses, people are going to lose their minds, and rightfully so. I mean, the amount of money. I mean, think about this. We're spending $17,000 per student. LaSalle costs what was it? I looked the other day. I think LaSalle was $12,000 or something like that. Bayview was 16 for high school. So as far as quality of education, what are we getting? We're not getting a top-notch education, and we're talking we might not even be getting busing. Our district, I'll tell you right now, if things go that direction, what you're going to see is, and there's been rumblings about it for years, and my take on it has actually changed over time, but there's going to be a call for deregionalization. I think that, Bristol sees themselves as carrying Warren. I think the Warren Town Council has been somewhat reckless financially, and this is all going to come to a head, and Bristol does not want Warren dragging it down. So you're going to see, when it starts getting really uncomfortable, and all of a sudden, like I said, one Chromebook. Most of us, like parents, we hate the damn things. We hate the fact that our kids have way too much screen time. And you talk about, like, the FDA says students should have no more than I believe in middle school it's like 2 hours of screen time a day. Yet we park them in front of a Chromebook, and it's the primary tool they use to learn, especially with distance learning. I just don't, this, and it's not just our district. If these things are happening everywhere, and because of the pandemic, they may very well go that direction. You're going to see people calling for a voucher system. Give me my $17,000 and let me go somewhere else. And that's when you'll see a real deep impact as far as, now the district has to compete for its students. And that's going to be a driver. If you want to see a motivating reason, to have our school district perform, I'll tell you right now, you want to be a top 5 and 5, tell them if we're not top 5 and 5, then we go to a voucher system, and then the public schools will be competing for our dollars, because we can either take it there or we can take it to a private school elsewhere. That'll be a motivator. Will it happen? No, but you know what? Hey, we got 5 years. People, start contacting your local representatives, start contacting your local senators, your town council members, and say, listen, this is a mess, and we want to have more choice when it comes to our children's education. And maybe the school choice conversations becomes a little bit more serious in our district.
Well, it's an interesting point, Daryl. On the coalition, on a separate show, we've had national subject matter experts come in on school vouchers. The state of Arizona, for example, now has a pilot program running in a significant part of the state. They call it educational scholarship accounts. And in those districts, And interestingly enough, they've targeted some of the most troubled districts, including Indian reservations, for example. They've presented them with effectively a debit card, much like you would see with an HSA card, where you can take a good chunk of the money that was allocated to you in the school funding formula. In this case, let's just say hypothetically, $17,000 is the Bristol-Warren amount. All right, well, here's 15. Go spend it on whatever you want. You're not going to send our children to your schools. But as you point out, there is in Rhode Island a very strong subset of parochial schools, which are open to all, which provide high quality education in that $12,000 to $15,000 space. Very often, school district officials will conflate that and say, well, you can't go to Moses Brown, you can't go to Lincoln on that money. And you know what? They're right, even though folks should be aware that schools like Moses Brown, Lincoln, all have scholarships and have financial aid. So folks, if you're getting nervous about this right now, I would, just as me interjecting myself in the conversation again, I would suggest that you avail yourself now of the opportunities that may be appropriate for your family in either any one of the fine parochial high schools in this state, and they're all over the state, and or the handful of private schools that dot the east side and actually the East Bay as well. There are, this program wasn't set up to talk people out of public schools, but it's to point out the obvious flaws. One has to, though, start to consider as a parent the options. And my children just graduated from college, so a sigh of relief. That's one challenge I don't have to face right now. But as someone who has spent a lifetime, literally a lifetime, trying to figure out how to get his children a top-notch education, I can tell you, just to throw this out there, you're talking to a guy who did over 3,000 Lyft rides while working full-time so that he could send his children to the right schools. I know the pain, and I know the opportunities, too, that are out there. It's daunting for everyone, isn't it? I mean, these are, we've got a number of folks weighing in right now who are both school bus drivers. We've got school monitors weighing in. Jill points out buses hold 70 to 77. That's 3 children to a seat. We can't even conceive of that given until Friday night at about 9 o'clock at night when the governor decided to, again, this isn't the place for that conversation. We have to point out, though, in light of the social distancing issues that are being presented vis-a-vis school bus driving, the governor dove headfirst for a photo op, and I mean only a photo op, in amongst a compressed, sweaty, frustrated crowd, ignoring everything that she stood for since March. So who knows, Daryl, do we even know what the rules are anymore? Are there rules?
They were talking about I believe the capacity of the school buses would be, it's 1 kid per seat. And it basically brings it down to 22 students per bus. Mm-hmm. So, drastically slashing. You'd have to at least double the number of buses. Again, I don't know how this looks. And again, these are the questions, we'd like to see these things rolled out, not piecemeal, as far as information being shared. This is something that if it's really the case, and again, I don't know why they would even breathe this if it wasn't a real possibility, because of the reaction that it'll cause or has caused. And to that point, there are a lot of people in the that parents group who are on that Zoom meeting that, they said, we need to get the word out. It was a relatively small group of people when you talk about the size of the district. And they're like, dear God, other people have to know what's going on here, because it wasn't being shared district-wide. It's, you only get information if you ask questions. And even then, if it's something they don't want to tell you, they won't. I've asked Dr. Bryce a question in the past, and he said no comment. I'm like, I'm not press. I'm a parent in this district. That's, no comment isn't an acceptable response. But I understand I have a very, very specific relationship with him at this point, and I don't necessarily expect him to greet me with smiles and handshakes. So,
well, you've got about 75 days left. Sorry about that. We got a little. Occasionally, folks, we get a little back chatter here. This is like so many of us. We're no longer in a studio situation. It is a internet connectivity issue. Which, again, when you talk about 3-4 children in a household, plus a parent, all having to work off of separate computers, I've seen that dream in person. It's ugly. But ultimately, you've got about, 75 days left until the school effectively has to be ready to start?
Yeah. And here's the thing. We have, listen, I'll be honest, like, and I'm going to do a quick sidebar. Something I actually wanted to say at the beginning. I want to put a special thank you out to a lot of the parents and teachers in the district. I was the beneficiary of their kindness and goodwill when they showed up at my house on Friday with a congratulatory sign and her moving up certificate for Abby because she was going up to the high school. This was something where it was I believe the district paid for the signs, but it was the PTOs and the teachers and parents and volunteers, staff members who, hopped in their cars and were honking horns and waving and delivering these literally to every student's household. So we have great people in this community, and it's a small community. These are small towns, and a lot of us know each other. A lot of us were raised here, and knowing the kind of the tone and the temperament, I honestly believe that if and again, we saw it with things like the sign delivery, or what they did for the high school students as well. They did something very similar. These are the things that I honestly believe if the district viewed our community as a partner, and didn't just, worry about themselves or, within their bubble. I honestly believe that if they reach out, there are a lot of very smart people. There are a lot of dedicated people, a lot of people who want to help and help solve problems. And so rather than on a case-by-case basis, they really need to reach out to the community and say, listen, we all need to figure this out. And I honestly believe that, we have really good people in our district. I see it on a daily basis. The people that I get to work with the advocacy group, this is a part to full-time job for some of us. And it's thankless. And it's, for a lot of the times, it's, publicly it's thankless a lot of the times, but on a case-by-case basis, I still communicate with students that I helped with bullying issues years ago. They may have moved out of town, out of state. They're in different schools, but they reach out to me and say, hey, here's how he's doing, or here's how she's doing. And, these are kids who may have had, psychological distress because of the systemic bullying they were experiencing. And to hear that they're doing well is fantastic. But I think that, if our district really was honest about things and reached out, that our community would come together and we try and figure something out. There are businesses, small businesses that have a long history of doing what they can to give back. There are people on an individual basis who have given their time and volunteered in our schools and done what they can. There are people who are very good at raising money. And so these are all skill sets that very few people have all of them, but collectively it's something that we, I think, again, if the district reached out to us, we could solve a lot of these problems together. You need multiple voices, multiple points of view. People who are, and that includes the people following right now, the bus monitors and the bus drivers, I don't know jack about a school bus. Okay. But these people do, it's part of their job. So they might say, hey, listen, you know what? We may be able to do X because of their proximity, because of their job, they have an understanding of things, or, we see this stuff all the time. Some of the best ideas coming out of, large corporations is the functional stuff that people who are down at the lower level say, I deal with this and it's broken. And what if we did X? And it might get, cooked and changed a little bit as it goes up, and, tweaked to make sure it's something that's viable or whatnot. But I believe that if the district was open and honest with us and came to us as true partners and did, some really open meetings, take feedback. And this, they're always going to say we can take feedback and reach out to the superintendent. No, we need everybody to hear the questions. That's the same thing I say about school committee meetings. Yeah, I don't go up. I could ask my questions or make my statements to Dr. Bryce. I don't, or the school committee. Will that serve a purpose? Possibly. But I also know that it's really important for other people who they might not think of these questions, or they don't even know that these things are even an issue. They need to hear the questions being asked. They need to hear the answers, or the fact that there isn't an answer. This is that's the value there. So I think this one-on-one, like, reach out on an individual basis. No. We need to open things up again, be transparent, and get people involved, because I honestly believe that if you reach out to our community, we will be able to work together with this district to solve some of these problems. It's not going to be perfect, but you're going to be better off. And at least if we're involved, we will have an understanding of the real challenges. We can sit here and be armchair quarterbacks without knowing everything. But let us into the kitchen, let us see how the sausage is made, and we might be able to help. These are our kids, and I know a lot of people, most people run through walls for their kids. So give us the opportunity to. A lot of people who want to help. Give them a job, give them something they can do, give them a role in this, because we all want to make this better. It's not about just exposing the bad and embarrassing people. It's not about that. It's about nothing's going to fix itself, and we give people the opportunity. But if we see these things happening, we're going to bring people's attention to it in hopes that all of us can fix these things.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. If folks want to dial in, again, the phone number is 401-205-3738. Also, we've got a couple more folks who have weighed in. And I know, Daryl, one of the things that you may have spoken to the last time you were on the air, but I think it's a great point. It bears repeating. As systemic as some of these issues are with the management at the school district level, ultimately the controlling force really is at the electoral level of the school board. Speak to that in a minute, but Tanya has posted this point. We bus drivers could figure this out if we were informed of this issue. There is always a solution.
Exactly.
Tanya, you're exactly right. Corey joins us again. I think there is chronic issue with the district, especially some good school committee members. Especially some school committee members and BWEF members, that because they haven't experienced it in their lives or in some ripple effects for them, that they really believe that there isn't bullying, racial issues, and really troubled kids who need help. It needs to start being, let's help all kids, and people need to get their head out of the sand because there are kids who need more. That pretty much nails it.
Succinctly put, we could have done a half an hour just condensed into that.
Corey, if you want to call in, we could have you on the air next week, and we give this guy Daryl a little bit of a break. But Daryl, again, in closing, the electoral process for this, there is ample time coming up to consider alternatives to the existing power structure, if you will, for lack of a better term. How important is that people consider those alternatives now? Because clearly it ain't working, is it?
No, and I think one of the challenges on the political side of things is the impact on the pandemic, as far as getting signatures and declaration and things like that. That's with social distancing. I don't know how you're supposed to go door to door and get signatures so you can get on the ballot. Who knows what that looks like? These are decisions that we should be, declaration period is the, first couple, actually it's right around the corner, within the next week or so, I believe. So how do you get, on the ballot as far as your signatures and such? So that's going to be a challenge. My hope is that, as Corey, who commented, I have some concerns about our school committee. I'll talk about that later, but I think in general, there are certain people who I think there's a very small number of people who are steering things, and it's being done to the benefit of very few people. I know that people on the school committee may use their influence in the schools. We've talked about that in the past, and certainly as people declare and that stuff shakes out. But I hope people run, and I hope people, what you have to look at is, and the folks I mentioned earlier who might be running, and the fact that they're all from the same school of thought, or they're BWEF people or whatever the case is, that's concerning for me, because I've seen a level of decision making there that I think is questionable. There's some behavior there that I think is questionable. We've talked about all this stuff, and maybe we get into
Daryl?
it down the road.
Daryl, we have a caller. It comes in as anonymous. So hold on to seatbelt. Let's hear what Anonymous has to say. Anonymous, you are on the line. What's your first name? And say hi to Daryl.
Hello?
Yeah, you're actually on the line.
Hello?
Go ahead.
I can't hear anything. Hello?
Okay, you are on the line. You should be able to, or actually ask me your question if you can't hear anything. And
or I can hear you. I don't know if they can hear me.
Hello?
Ask away.
Or ask on the chat.
Hello? Hello?
Oh, that was frustrating. So that didn't come through. If Anonymous, if you're listening, just put a question in the chat. We're sorry we couldn't pick up on you. I know you tried to. May have been someone else named Anonymous called a little earlier. So Daryl, let's. I guess we sadly need to kind of
wrap it up. That's fine. So like we said, and just in closing, my hope is this is something that people see some value in. If you want to reach out to me, you can reach out through the Facebook is real easy. Google my name, you'll see my phone number and all that stuff. Trust me, that's been shared far and wide recently. If people have questions, reach out. Our hope we'll continue to share things. Please follow the advocacy page. My hope is that no one needs us in the bullying 504 IEP capacity. It's and my sincere hope that there are less issues that we have to talk about like this. But we're here to help, and a large portion of that is sharing information. I know sometimes it's unpleasant to hear, but we have a long history of sharing fact. I've said it before. There are a lot of people who don't necessarily like my style. And if they had the opportunity to say I was a liar or sharing misinformation or whatever the case may be, it would, you trust me, you'd hear it. And my credibility would be shot. So we only share what we know to be fact. We don't get into the low level drama stuff. And we do it, believe it or not, it's somewhat of a public service. We believe everybody needs to know this information. So you know who you should be supporting or not supporting, or what questions to be asked, or you can, so my hope is that, and if it's something we need to organize, we'll do so, but let's start looking at some, large parent, not just school, within the schools. Those are very helpful, but maybe even getting some representatives from those PTOs to come together and, doing some kind of committee out of there where they can, interact with the district and advocate for these things, because we need more information. We need to know what's happening. We all deserve this. I feel for, like I said, it's bad enough for the parents who are like, damn, I might get my kid to school next year. But
Daryl, let me jump in for a second. The Miranda is, and this is fascinating to me, because this is a really nice touch, and to see this not be successful is kind of sad. Miranda notes the bus driver's monitors made a clip to say, "See you next year. Have a great summer, etc." to the families, and thank you to the district. It was sent to Dr. Bryce, according to Miranda, and I guess it appears that they never reached their intended destination. Now, Miranda, I'd love to have you reach out to Daryl offline to talk about that because, it's, I want to say this carefully. Bus drivers and monitors are a critical part of the daily student process. And I know that there are times when they are taken for granted. We are blessed here in the state that our bus drivers and monitors are accomplished professionals. And the way we know that is because, well, we never hear about them. And the reason why we never hear about them is because they have quite the safety record in this state. Bus monitors were put in place years ago because of a tragedy. And every morning when I'm late to work, I get caught behind the bus and I see these folks who are clearly concerned with the children, clearly have made a connection with these children. These children spend a lot of time with in some cases, with their drivers and monitors, and they look up to them as, sort of their family figures to them. They see them every day, and connections and relationships are made. To see that type of outreach, which was, in my imagination, done clearly on people's own time and just as a gesture during a difficult year, I think would be sad. But Daryl, any thoughts? I mean, I think that bears a connect. Go ahead, buddy.
I think it's a great point. I think, when you think about this, when it's, and I know a lot of parents, bring their kids to their first day of school. Not everybody can do it. And so think about this. Your bus monitor and your bus driver might be the first person from the schools that your kindergartner or first grader interact with. They're the ones when the bus doors open and they're there for their first day of school. These are the people who you have to comfort the crying child. You have to and again, this isn't part of their job description, but but this is one of those things that this is part of the reason why these people do these jobs. They like being at the ground level. They like that interaction. You have relationships with these people. These people know their bus drivers. So I think it's really awesome. I'm not surprised. I think it's really awesome that they put the video together. And I'll reach out to Dr. Bryce. I hope they do as well. And just say, hey, listen, we got made aware that, they put this video together. Yeah, people put their time and heart into this because they care, so they do this, let the, for the students, for the families. And I think it'd be received very well, if that had happened, I would have loved the opportunity to say 5 minutes ago when I was giving kudos to everybody else to say, hey, special thanks to the bus monitors, and the bus drivers. They did something really cool. And they took these videos saying, bye, and we'll see you next year, hopefully, and that's awesome. But
you could send them here. Listen, if nothing else, upload it to ours, and we'll make sure that everybody in the state sees it. Because think also, Daryl, in many cases when you've got a lower school, middle school, some of these bus drivers or monitors meet these kids for the first time when they're they're little tots. And they're the ones who see them up through first, second, third grade, sometimes maybe even longer. It's that's the kind of stuff that breaks my heart. It really does.
Miranda, please, if you have that content, Miranda, please, if you feel comfortable and if you have the approval to do so, whatever the case may be, it sounds like you guys did it on your own. Give it to us. We'll be happy to share it. There are a couple of town pages in Bristol-Warren and around town Bristol. We'll certainly make sure it goes out there. We have a broad enough reach where, hell, I'll pay to sponsor that thing and have it appear up in everybody's news feed for the next 2 weeks. But so please share that with us. We've been more than happy to put that out there for you. Thank you for making the effort. I know the students would love to see it. One of the greatest things for me this past week was my daughter getting to say goodbye to some of her middle school teachers. It was very important to her. And they were great and being a part of it. And they wanted to make a point of saying goodbye to her too. And that's what a lot of the stuff is about. It's about the relationships that these kids build with their teachers and with the faculty and staff and the bus drivers and the monitors and the administrators. Like this should be how things work. And that's what we push for. So again, if you feel comfortable, share it with us and we'll do the best we can to put it out there for you.
Peter Carpenter weighs in. We have a kindergartner that attends an elementary school in Bristol, and the bus driver and monitor have been a huge key to making our son comfortable and confident in those first few weeks. Yeah.
No, I think it's one of those aspects that people don't think about.
No, you're right. And again, this is, if we could take positivity away from conversations like this, is that it's clear that Bristol and Warren are communities that deeply care about their children, deeply want to be involved. You know, there's so many, my wife's a teacher, and she fortunately teaches in a very good environment as well. But I can tell you from her experience, there are school districts around the country where people are just mailing it in, that you don't have that emotional bond, you don't have the community backing you up. Let's take away a positive that in towns like this, people give a damn, people care, and they want to look after each other, and here's the key, they want to participate. They want to be involved. That is possibly the single biggest difference between successful school systems and failing school systems, that you have a true community involvement. And that's something that should be treated as a strength, not a challenge to someone's administrative confidence, if you will. And that's the difference, what truly takes. If you want to take a school department to the next level, that's a critical component for making that jump. It just is. I don't know, Daryl, I don't know if you
that bridge between the community.
Right. I just, why don't you take us home for tonight? Folks, a quick farewell message, if you will. Daryl, we're going to have Daryl on as we build up our new facility here in Providence. The coalition is going to have Daryl on repeatedly, particularly as we approach the school year, in order to give him a bigger forum to present his challenges to the school district and what his community and what his committee can accomplish on your behalf. And then we'll be with him throughout the school year, because ultimately it just doesn't end at Labor Day. There will be, the world as we know it in education has changed, I believe, permanently. And we need folks who are willing to take the ball and run with it. So Daryl, I'll do the station closeout, but you have any final thoughts you want to add?
No, just like I said, we're almost done with the school year. Thank you to all the teachers who worked so hard with distance learning and trying to make this stuff work. Kudos to the parents who are working so hard at your jobs and trying to become a teacher and manage all this stuff under very difficult circumstances. My hope is this, people start paying attention and we start to unify and work in the same direction with the school district. So we're here as always. Thank you, Pat, for giving us this platform to share things, and for the added functionality of people, be able to call in and text in and stuff, because it's, in as much as some of this is sharing, people are going to have some good questions or information that they want to get that we might not even have, but at least if we know they want it, we can certainly make the effort to get it for them. So thank you for everybody for following along. Like I said, we'll do this from time to time. Please follow the advocacy page. We share a lot there as well. And if you think we can be of any assistance, reach out privately and we'll do what we can there as well.
I want to take a moment to thank folks for joining and participating. The purpose of the Coalition Radio Network, if you will, is to provide community programming for people of all backgrounds, people of all concerns on what we call third rail issues across the state. It can range anything from educational to legal, to judicial system, politics. As you know, you can tell we're commercial free, so we afford the opportunity for speakers to really dig in and dive deep into their subject matter. And if you've got issues or concerns that you want to address, feel free to send them to p4@coalitionradio.us. And as always, if you could take a moment to like us or share the page, we'd be grateful for that too. So in closing, we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network here at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradionetwork.com, our legacy page at coalitionradio.us. We've been on the air for almost 8 years now, believe it or not. We welcome you to our audience, and we hope to see you again soon. Have a wonderful evening.